I think exposure to those realities are a big part of it, because every day you wake up, if you don't be intentional about exposing your kids and yourselves to these realities, then you are perpetuating kind of the bubble that you're naturally gonna live in. The people with whom we naturally associate, the things we do as part of our regular routine. I think that one of the biggest blind spots today is that we don't be intentional about exposing ourselves to all the diversity that's out there, socioeconomic, racial, political, whatever.
David, we're going to transition. You've already given us a lot of practical wisdom, but in the second half of this, we always just like to ask some very practical advice in different areas of life. But can you start by telling a young man like me, what is your best marriage advice with 40 plus years of marriage?
I'm not the marriage expert, to be sure, but
neither am I.
Yeah, I do think that one of the struggles for high capacity business people is that we are typically by nature doers and more than beers, sometimes, and sometimes the relationship side of things can pay the price. It's sometimes harder for us to be in the moment, to focus on the relationship side that we know biblically, the marriage relationship is so critical, yet I think at times I have shortchanged that on that journey. And if I could go back and have a redo, I think being better first in a better spouse during those busy years where the busiest season of life is when you're raising kids and starting business or growing in business and still trying to be involved with civic and ministry things. That is the busy time. That's where the greatest mistakes can be made, I think, or the greatest decisions and disciplines can be developed. And so that's the proving ground. And I look back on things I did well. I look back on things I did poorly. But I think that's where accountability is the stage of life where accountability is most important. Are you willing to invite peers into your life to say, hold me accountable in these areas? But little things like, the date nights. How do you be intentional about, keeping that relationship strong? Talk about what can you do for your kids? You've heard it. The best thing you do for your kids is to have a strong marriage. So focus on that, whatever it takes to work on that relationship. Do not let that, take a back seat to kind of our ladder climbing and our, doing these good works or whatever. But it's time, it's quality and quantity. And it's one of those tensions that's there. But I'm saying this a lot from looking back, not from being the one that looks upon that as saying that's the one I did particularly well during that phase.
You've given some advice earlier about parenting, but I am curious, what are some things that you did when your children were younger that you feel like are paying dividends now that they're adults in your relationship with them?
Well, to me, it starts with the spiritual formation. Wanting them to deal with that at an early age, because that hopefully will keep them from, first of all, it's what's more important than figuring out your relationship with God and how we see ourselves, can we see ourselves as God sees us? So spiritual formation, church attendance. We didn't really have a kind of a go away place, a second home, whatever. So we were able to, be in church most Sundays, good spiritual formation. Even, we talk about Young Life. Young Life's been, Don and I have been involved with Young Life for most of our adult career. And, we would in our homes host club, host meetings, so exposure to, our spiritual journeys, letting them see that. So to me, it starts with, spiritual formation. I mean, just the, value based, not trying to, they grew up, uh, with plenty, but not abundance. They had everything they needed, but just like we talk about, what do you give them? There's a lot more risk than there is upside to being overly generous with your children, and at least until they're well into their adulthood. So I think what you expose them to, we talked about it, expose them to what's going on in the urban parts of your city, or the diversity. I think a lot of the division within the body of Christ, whether it's political, racial, socioeconomic, how do you be intentional about exposing yourself and your kids to those realities, the realities that are going on in your own city, not, or internationally. I think exposure to those realities are a big part of it, because, every day you wake up, if you don't be intentional about exposing your kids and yourselves to these realities, then you are perpetuating kind of the bubble that you're naturally gonna live in. The people with whom we naturally associate the things we do as part of our regular routine. I think that one of the biggest blind spots today is that we don't be intentional about exposing ourselves to all the diversity that's out there, socioeconomic, racial, political, whatever, so that we learn from that. We are humbled by that. We become better listeners by that. And I think ultimately we start developing skill sets that better enable us to be kind of agents of redemption or agents of reconciliation. So all that comes into parenting, I think, and as well as, our own journeys, right? I mean, those are lessons for all of us.
David, you, Lloyd, and I are all in a cyclical business, the real estate industry. How have you managed? You've obviously been through multiple major down cycles. How have you managed the ups and downs of the real estate business on a personal level?
I'd say the first thing that comes to mind there is don't get too exuberant in the upturns, because a downturn is coming. So it's enticing. It's that greed, fear spectrum. Greed creeps in for all of us, and that we've not done anything to eliminate cycles. Cycles do happen. They will happen. They will continue to happen, and it's particularly when things get exuberant that the antenna ought to go up, and that's when you're saying, okay, either scale back a little bit or structure deals more conservatively. Certainly keep dry powder. Look at for small, medium-sized businesses is cash. I mean, where you get in trouble is cash when the lenders get tough. So dry powder, cash. Cash is king. What's your backup plan for capital? So conservatism, capital. Pay attention to your capital. Risk profiles. Both in how much money you're willing to put in a deal, what kind of recourse or guarantees you take. But it's better to be a little conservative and give up some of the upside than it is to just kind of go for it all and take a high risk profile. So those are kind of the low hanging fruit pieces of advice I would start with.
I believe we're about to figure out who got a little too exuberant the last 10 years.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Can you talk about any books that come to mind that have greatly influenced your life? Obviously, Halftime, I know has, but are there any other books that come to mind that have influenced your way of thinking?
Bob Lupton, who I referenced earlier, he's done several books. One, Toxic Charity, is a great one. Just kind of how do you go beyond, if you want to be, being philanthropic, but how do you do that prudently? That's a huge theme for people with surplus that want to be generous. How do you do that? Where, you think about how do you invest with, do you align with their mission? Do you buy into a leadership team, and how do you, what's the ROI, and what are your expectations for those type of things? Having a similar rigor. I mean, obviously you got the missional component, but how do you apply a rigor to how you're dealing with your philanthropy or impact investing, which is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. One of the initiatives I'm involved in Atlanta is affordable housing, and we've set up some affordable housing funds. And really, I think it's an area where the private sector, talk to fellow real estate guys, affordable housing is daunting in every community around the country. And who better than private sector real estate people to weigh in, along with the nonprofits and the public sectors, to help figure out how to, we understand risk, capital stacks, management, pro formas, all the things that go into how do you figure out how to create more affordable housing supply? What are the challenges? How do you start building ecosystems to support that? So, that's something for, I think, our industry to take on more intentionally, since I think as investors, developers, have a lot of the skill sets that it's going to require to weigh into that. I think I got off the question a little bit.
No,
there.
that was right. I was asking about books that had influenced you.
David, one area where I think you've excelled is this idea of relationships, deep friendships with other people. A lot of guys, particularly, come to the mid-season of life, and those deep, intimate friendships have been squeezed out. And sometimes it's a bit weird when you start building intentionally deep, intimate friendships with other guys. What's that like for you? What tips do you have for us?
Yeah, and I think some of that has evolved the way I look at it over time. It's, like some of Donna's and my dearest friends now are people that we have journeyed together on things like Nicaragua or other endeavors that were not maybe our closest friends in early adulthood. The people that we'd gone to high school or college, or our kids grew up together and we got to know each other well then. But I think there's these new developing relationships that you share a lot in common because you're missionally aligned and you're on journeys together. And so I think being open to evolving, but just with, some of the coaching through halftime is, how do you identify those key relationships? How do you be intentional about investing time in them? Obviously, you may have 100 good acquaintances, but how do you prioritize those? And a lot gets done through good acquaintances, right? Those are very valued relationships, but they're different time commitments, but you still, those are real important, particularly in kind of the social entrepreneurship space. It's like, these are people you call on that you're vetting ideas with, and, they're your partners on some of these endeavors. But, then they're people that you just want to invest more time with. And some of that, of course, stage of life now becomes, what are you doing with the younger generation? Being more available for mentoring, whether that's soft or whatever, but being available. I mean, I do think from post-pandemic and having, less travel, less face-to-face meetings, and having more time opened up than ever experienced in my adult life or all of life before that. I think one of the things I've felt is almost like this ministry of availability, having more gaps in my schedule than I've ever had before, to be available to take that impromptu call and meeting, to meet with people that want to pick your brain. And whenever I have kind of the opportunity to speak to groups, I say, look, if anybody wants to grab breakfast or lunch and process something you've heard, just call me up, and, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. And so, some of it's that availability at this stage of life, and but having people that you can go to and brainstorm, whether in some of it's peers, but some of it's, you got people above you, you got people at your level, and you got people below you, and how, different where you are in the stage of life may dictate, which of those is more important. But again, being intentional about reviewing your relationships. Where are you where are the gaps, which, there's a strategic element to that. And then there's just, where I have responsibilities, where, what does love require of me, in each of these relationships. But it's like everything else. You need to do your periodic reviews to say, where am I off track? What do I need to correct, or where I need to spend more time, and the relational side of that is critically important. And I've listened to Lloyd talk about this and learn from what Lloyd has done, and appreciate the guidance you have provided to me and so many others there.
Me as well. All I do is do exactly what Lloyd tells me.
Yeah. Good advice.
As we come short on time here, I always like to ask people, if you had to go back a couple years to when you're 30, 35 years old, with the blessing of wisdom and perspective, what advice would you give to yourself?
I would, I go back to use of time and discipline. You've got so many demands on you at that phase. And so developing good habits, good disciplines, kind of the genius of compound interest. I think the little things you do day in and day out, by the time you're 40, 50, 60, I think it pays huge dividends if you do those little things right on a day-to-day basis. So whether that's your spiritual disciplines, whether that's, spending, your time wisely. I think, we enjoy, there are times where we know what we should do, but we do what we want to do because it feels better. It's fun. So we've all seen ourselves make decisions that we knew were not wise decisions, at least for the long term, but they felt good, or we just wanted to do them. But I just think habits, just good habits in all phases of life, and trying to reinforce those, and periodic checks on that, because that pays the big dividends, and I think it keeps you out of a lot of trouble as well.
David, thank you so much. Mike, I don't know about you, but I got like 2 pages of notes of stuff, right?
I have 3 pages.
Won't all of our friends benefit from just listening, not only to the wisdom David brings, but to the way the Lord has shaped his heart and his kindness and humility. So, David, thank you for taking an hour, away from your time at the mountains there to share your wisdom with not only Mike and I, but thousands of other people that through, hopefully the Lord will use it to bless.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and thanks for all that both of y'all are doing too. Appreciate both
David,
of you.
Thanks for your time today. Thanks for the example you set for younger guys like me. And I've just loved our conversation today, and we'll apply a lot of it. So thanks so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the 100X podcast. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast service. We would greatly appreciate it if you could rate the show and leave us a review. This podcast is sponsored by Anchor Investments, whose mission is to build America's most generous real estate company. To learn more, please visit anchorinv.com.